No, I don't work Friday nights or I don't work Saturdays. It's like saying,
I think that's
I want to
setting
work.
boundaries.
They've been protected. They've been, in some cases, mollycoddled. Many business leaders have spoken about the difficulty.
Which one?
I can't name it, but there are many of them.
Absolutely, when you're spending $40 a day on smashed avocado and coffees.
Workers in the UK are £11,000 worse off a year after 15 years of completely unprecedented wage stagnation.
I literally cannot be bothered to do anything at the moment. Since leaving uni, I haven't seen the point in working or trying to save money. And why spend 8 hours a day in some old crusty office when I could just be at home spending all my money on Netflix, takeaways, and obviously vapes? Although if I did have to work, I would always sneak out before 4, having spent the day just hiding in the corner and doom scrolling. What is the point in getting a career, saving for a house, or even voting? I just feel so apathetic. Okay, not quite. However, Gen Z's work ethic, among other issues, has certainly come under some intense scrutiny. Is this due to a malfunction in our DNA? Are people picking on us? Or are we simply adjusting to factors that are beyond our control? Well, this is what we are going to explore today. I will begin by outlining some of the standard rhetoric around our generation. Then, the main part of the video will explore this in further depth to see whether these are simply stereotypes or if there are also other factors at play. The themes will entail conflict between generations, changes within the workplace, and broader systemic changes. Finally, I'll share some tips on how to navigate these times, both for people in Gen Z and for older generations. And by the way, welcome to my first proper video essay. On this channel, I'll upload videos on social, political and cultural issues every fortnight. My videos will mainly feature me for now, although the long-term goal is to interview others. But in the meantime, after watching this of course, you can watch my introduction video to find out more about myself and this channel. You will also find all of the sources used for research in my description. But without further ado, let's get into this. There has been substantial messaging around how Gen Z has a poor work ethic, lacks resilience, and is easily offended. Meanwhile, we would rather spend money on pointless things, like Netflix, than make the effort to invest in property. Unsurprisingly, much of this criticism has come from older generations. A video by ABC News sums it up pretty well, whereby one interviewee implied that we were selfish, another labelled us as lazy, and someone else blatantly called us dumb nuts. Although interestingly, some were a lot more sympathetic. Gen Z is also heavily criticised within the workplace, where we're often denounced as lazy or too woke. To illustrate this, content creator stated that many employers see us as entitled, complain that we're often late, and even dare to take our complete lunch break. Furthermore, Australian property developer Tim Gurner stated that young people are at fault for not being able to afford a home, because we spend too much money on avocado on toast. Bearing in mind that as of October 2023, his net worth was estimated to be 1.1 billion. But the question remains, why are so many people slandering our generation? The next part of the video will explore a possible psychological cause, namely intergenerational conflict, which refers to conflict which perhaps innately exists between generations. Throughout history, older generations have tended to look down upon younger ones. Therefore, experiencing discord from older generations is not unique to Gen Z. For example, in the 1920s, there was conflict between parents and their flapper daughters, stemming from recent changes in lifestyle and culture. And if that is not enough, even ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle proclaimed that the young in Greece think that they know everything and are always quite sure of it. There are also stereotypes attributed to each generation. Boomers, for instance, are closed-minded, lack touch with reality, and can't even open a PDF. Okay, so the last one may be true. I've even noticed though some light-hearted dissonance between millennials, which is all about jeans. To turn a long story short, millennials don't particularly like how low-rise jeans have become popular amongst our generation, even though they used to wear them all the time. But rest assured, all of this goes a lot deeper than genes. Instead, it relates to a phenomenon known as intergenerational conflict. Intergenerational conflict refers to conflict that occurs between different generations, and it has been studied extensively by both historians and sociologists. A compelling explanation for intergenerational conflict was put forward by sociologist Carl Mahim. Mahim proposed that people born around the same time experience the same socio-political events as they grow up. These events impact people's opportunities, perspective, and values. For example, our generation has experienced the impacts of the pandemic as we have been trying to get on with exams, live our lives, and navigate the job market. Of course, COVID impacted everyone. However, being at a more impressionable age when our lives change will likely impact us a lot. Many of us may not have been able to experience life as we had hoped, and the economic impacts are likely to still impact our opportunities today. Consequently, some may see the world as less predictable and prioritise taking each day as it comes. And if older generations perceive this as laziness, rather than fully comprehend the extent to which COVID has impacted us, tensions could emerge. This links to age stratification theory, which proposes that age strongly impacts the extent to which people can obtain influence and resources. Generally, older generations are likely to be better off than younger ones. However, it also impacts people's views, values, and political preferences. Younger generations may be more inclined to favour a larger welfare state than older ones, if they are on a lower income. And in the UK, evidence suggests that younger generations are more likely to support left-leaning parties. For example, in 2019, over 55% of the vote of 18 to 34-year-olds went to Labour, compared to just over 15% of over 65s. Therefore, younger generations might result older generations for being more likely to vote for parties aligned with the right. However, it is essential to recognise that the political system in the UK is incredibly nuanced, and multiple factors influence people's voting decisions, including income, education, and gender. Finally, there is social identity theory. This declares that, like with other identities including gender and race, people of each generation are likely to share traits that they have in common. This fosters a sense of unity, but it can lead to generational tensions. In particular, it can emerge if there are substantial value differences. However, stereotypical portrayals of different generations within the media can exacerbate this. Differences in values and behaviour are particularly prominent within the workplace, which intergenerational conflict helps in explaining. Think, often there is no option but to spend hours a day in an office with people of all ages and backgrounds, and there are at least one or two people there who you often disagree with and perhaps dislike. However, the world of work was also different 30 years ago. In that case, impacts of intergenerational conflict would likely be enhanced. That's due to various experiences at work, leading to diverse attitudes. The next part of the video will delve into this. I will also discuss portrayals in the media, employers' perspectives, and changes that have impacted Gen Z's experience in the labour market. A Telegraph headline stated that the Berkshire youth will not get out of bed for less than $40,000 a year. In response, another article from the same paper states that there has been too much spending on universities and the welfare state is too generous. Consequently, young people don't wish to work because our expectations of a job market are too high and we would rather not have to repay our student loans. Employers are also likely to lack optimism about young people's work ethic. Illustrating this, a survey conducted by Statistica revealed that less than 15% of employers considered Gen Z to be hardworking. Meanwhile, others labelled their young employees entitled, lazy and rude. Consequently, many Gen Z employees feared that these judgments would negatively impact their job opportunities. Another US survey showed 60% of employers had fired Gen Z graduates only a few months after they had been hired. But why do employers think this way? Could we be at fault? Some reasons point to differences in values and behaviours, which could lead to older bosses' enmity towards their younger employees. An article suggests that Gen Z might be more emotionally aware compared to their older counterparts, leading them to prioritise their mental health over working long hours. Meanwhile, Gen Z may attribute more value to a good work-life balance, but if older generations were used to grinding it out, they might disregard Gen Z's more relaxed approach. However, could there be other reasons, such as changes with the labour market? For instance, Gen Z employees will likely face layoffs and job insecurity. For example, a survey of over 32,000 workers across 17 countries found that 50% of Gen Z workers don't feel secure in their job. Furthermore, over 60% of Gen Z employees are being terminated, let go, or choosing to quit within their first year of employment, according to a post off LinkedIn. The rise in the gig economy has also contributed to these changes. However, I recognise that the Employment Rights Bill should mitigate some of this. But if keeping a job from one day to the next seems beyond our control, it is understandable that we might be less inclined to maximise effort within that job. Something that reflects this is a concept known as quiet quitting. It doesn't refer to actually quitting a job, in case you've not heard of it. Instead, it means showing up to work whilst putting in the bare minimum rather than maximising effort. It could be sneaking in the extra toilet break or playing the snake game when your manager's not watching. However, this is not a brand new phenomenon. Instead, people in the past behaved like this if they were not happy in a job. So why has it become an actual thing with Gen Z? Well, first of all, there has been a decline in hiring rates and a rise in applications. For example, in the UK, hiring dropped by 22.5% in June 2023, yet there was a huge rise in job applications, hence suggesting that it is much harder for us to find a job, particularly one which we want. Moreover, over time wages have stagnated against larger investments like housing. Between the late 1950s and the early 1990s, the average house cost between 4 and 6 times the average annual salary. In contrast, by November 2022, the average cost of a house was 9 times that. And if that is not enough, real wages, which account for inflation, have stopped increasing. This all suggests that it is genuinely more difficult for Gen Z to work hard to move up in the world, which is relevant to both obtaining a desired job and housing. Therefore, whilst working hard was a means to achieve status and resources for many among previous generations, it's a means for fewer among our own. So it is understandable that Gen Z feels fed up and potentially helpless. From this, the labour market has impacted our opportunities and some of our behaviours and values. But without being ironic, there is much more to life than just work, which leaves the question of what else could affect the differences between us and older generations. Just now, we have spoken about how homes have become less affordable, and coupled with wage stagnation, it is not an easy world to live in if you want a house. However, not just house prices and wages have impacted us. Instead, according to Statistica, as of January 2025, 57% of surveyed UK households reported higher living costs than the previous month. This profoundly impacts Gen Z, with 25% of us not spending anything on luxury items, including luxury food, cigarettes, and alcohol. Meanwhile, almost 70% of Gen Z adults reported turning down social activities because of their financial situation. A key reason was that Gen Z were trying to save. Yet, while some members of Gen Z successfully put some savings aside, others could not because of living costs. Contrary to what some newspapers and public figures articulate, it appears that we're just trying to make the best of a rather tricky situation. But what about people our age who seem to have everything sorted? Are they simply better than most, or have they had it easier? Although on average our generation's prospects may be worse, there will always be differences between people within the same generation. There is nothing more annoying to many than hearing someone around their age saying, "Oh, well, I managed to save for a house and get a good job, you just need to try harder," only to discover that their parents gave them the chunky loan and their dad is the manager in some financial place. However, because it is more difficult for Gen Z to get on the property ladder alone, they are more likely to require support from their family, which is commonly known as the bank of mum and dad. So very often, parents and grandparents support their children by providing financial support for things like properties as well as other things. For example, 62% of under 35s had received financial help from families and friends when purchasing a property, with most admitting that they would not have been able to afford that if it hadn't been for the support that they had received. However, the amount of financial support families can provide depends on their wealth and income, particularly wealth, which will obviously vary. For instance, the Resolution Foundation found that children of homeowners were more likely to become homeowners themselves. Therefore, while some young people might be able to obtain good financial support, others will not, and those who do get it may also find saving a lot easier. Going even further back, there are so many differences in young people's opportunities before they even become adults. If their parents are well off, they are likely to go to a good school, which will impact their job prospects later on. Therefore, some young people stand a better chance of securing a good job and earning decent money. To be honest, I am pretty privileged in this area. Otherwise, apart from anything else, I would not have time to make the video. I also got to go to a good school and was able to go to uni. A lot of people though don't have these opportunities, so be honest with yourself and others about what you have, because it's always easier to travel further where fewer obstacles are in the way. And if we're more understanding of what has impacted us, we're more likely to notice how things differ for other people, enabling us to work with others, be it of the same generation or otherwise. But besides this, how can we make matters better for ourselves and others? First, just be kind to yourself by recognising that many things are beyond your control. So don't blame yourself if you feel behind, because let's be real, things aren't easy at the moment. Whilst this is something that I'm in the habit of doing, try not to compare yourself to others. Success looks different to everyone, and we are all different from one another. Therefore, if you see something desirable in someone else, they may see something different but equally desirable in you. Also, your worth is not defined only by academic and career achievements. Are any of your friends just your friends because they have some cool job or got good grades? I highly doubt it. Therefore, be nice to yourself because you are deserving. If you can, learn about how changes in the world impact you and those around you. Learning from others is also a great way to gain insight. Don't be awkward about it, but if someone is talking about their lives, just listen and ask questions. Then use your voice to speak up for the challenges you and others face. This said, I think it's still important not to give up. I know the job market is really tough, but it's still worth continuing to apply and do things to enhance your prospects if you can, even if it's just setting aside an hour a week. So, this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for taking time to watch my first ever video essay, and please let me know if you've got any thoughts in the comments. The following video will be the first of a two-parter about the rise of the right among men. The video will investigate the potential causes of this, and again I'll try and provide some just trying to be helpful advice at the end. Finally, not to sound cliche, but if you enjoyed this video, it would be amazing if you subscribed and followed my socials, which are also in the description.